on preparing London for rapid global warming?
Thank you, Chair. Urgent action must be taken to reduce the impacts of climate change. I'm already taking some of the most radical action of any world city to adapt our city to our changing climate. The aim is for London and Londoners to be resilient to severe weather and longer-term climate change impacts of flooding, heat risk and drought. We're tackling this with policies in our environment strategy and London plan, including reducing overheating in buildings, managing flood risk on transport and encouraging better use of London's water. We're making sure that Londoners know when heat waves are forecast and what to do to protect themselves by promoting the Met Office of Public Health England's heat wave alerts and advice. We also ran London's first Flood Awareness Week last November to help Londoners understand how to prepare and what to do if their home is flooded. Through our funded programmes like the Greener Cities Fund, I'm making sure we have more green spaces in London that are better at holding and slowing down rainwater to reduce surface water flooding. We're working closely with the transport, health and food sectors to develop plans to address the impacts of our changing climate. My London plan contains robust policies to ensure new development is well adapted to climate change and resilient to severe weather. This includes more measures like green roofs to help absorb and slow rainwater to reduce flooding, as well as helping to cool buildings so they don't overheat by installing shading. My team is also working with the Environment Agency to ensure London remains well defended against tidal flooding, including successfully calling on neighbouring authorities to ensure that land is safeguarded for a new Thames barrier, which is likely to be needed in the 2070s. TfL is also working to make its network more resilient, including modifying stations to address flood risk. I'm also holding water companies to account to increase their resilience and that of London's water, plan for new water resources and reduce leakage. However, the majority of levers for tackling climate change lie with the national government. That's why I'm urging ministers to listen to the growing concerns and either take action or devolve powers and resources to cities like London so we can do what's needed to tackle the crisis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I recently sent to you my report on climate risks for London, which looks at the risks and impacts that Londoners are expected to experience in the next few decades in terms of floods, heat waves and severe weather events as a result of rapid global warming. So it's good to hear the list of things that you are working on. Now, the report highlighted some big gaps in research. For example, there are 643 schools in London that are at high risk of flooding. However, there's a lack of research on the impact of this risk on teaching days and pupil attainment. There's another example of a big gap on heatwave risks to London businesses, how they will cope during heat waves and droughts, the impact on their employees, their well-being and productivity, working in buildings that weren't designed for these conditions. So will you do the research or make sure that the relevant bodies do it to address these and other gaps that are identified in my report?
Can I thank Chair through you the Senator for her report and for sending that to me and the recommendations made. My officers have been gathering and publishing data, but it's time to take action now. What's more important now is that we move from research into action. That's what we're doing. We are working closely, though, with the Committee on Climate Change, DEFRA, and the Environment Agency to ensure we access the latest data and research in this field. My officers and the London Climate Change Partnership have been working closely with health, food, transport and emergency service sectors to develop plans for sectors to manage the risks and impacts and identify actions to be taken. And the work also involves convening sector partners and relevant experts, and you've mentioned some of them, Senator Russell, hospitals, temperature data to assess whether they're overheating, links between transport disruption and higher temperatures, identifying thresholds which are crucial for planning to prevent disruption. And we're facing our sector-based approach towards housing, workplaces and schools in future phases.
Thank you. Do you have a timetable for this work so that we can follow what you're planning and keep track of how you're doing?
Well, the London Climate Change Partnership is going as fast as they can with my officers. Some of this is contingent upon the sectors bringing information forward. A lot of this data, by the way, we've also put out there on the data store, Chair, so it's accessible to others as well who can help.
Thank you. At the plenary meeting last year on your draft economic development strategy, I asked you to commission an assessment of the economic risks of climate change and to include this in the data sets in your final strategy. It wasn't included in the final strategy. Will you do this now? That's commission an assessment of the economic risks of climate change.
I mean, the danger of spending all our time doing research is we're not taking action. And I've said in answer to the previous question, more than half of the steps that are needed to reduce carbon emissions have got to come from the government. We can only do less than half. So unless the government changes tack, we won't make any progress. That's why we're working closely with the Committee on Climate Change, DEFRA and the Environment Agency, as well as lobbying central government directly as well.
Of course, but I mean, even your Mott MacDonald report that you published last May said that most small and medium-sized enterprises do not have or only have limited business continuity plans and would struggle to maintain operations during a severe drought. So these are urgent issues, and actually you do need to have that research so that Londoners can prepare themselves. Now, you mentioned the London Climate Change Partnership. My report also recommended a substantial increase in budget for them. The GLA gives them £62,000 a year, which includes funding for one staff post. So will you carry out an urgent review into the funding that the London Climate Change Partnership needs to scale up their vital work to prepare London for climate breakdown?
Well, it's worth, Chair, reminding colleagues that since I became mayor, we've begun hosting the partnership from 2017 and funding the Secretariat. We also support the partnership in other ways, recognising the benefits they bring, and we'll carry on giving them all the expertise, information and advice they need. So it's not simply budgetary assistance, but it's other assistance we give them as well.
Is that a yes or a no?
That's what continues to help them as we've been helping them.
Okay, but you're not necessarily going to give them any more money?
We're not going to directly increase their budget immediately, but we are going to carry on helping them and scaling up the work they're doing.
Okay, thank you. I'm out of time.